This program is brought to you by Newsworks in cooperation with Eau Claire County. This program is simulcast on WRFP-LP 101.9 FM.
Call to order the meeting of the Eau Claire County Board of Supervisors, August 21st, 2018. We've got confirmation of compliance with open meetings law. Okay. We'll start by honoring the flag and a moment of reflection. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Our individual who was going to do the moments of reflection isn't here, but I think I can reflect.
Actually, I got a phone call and I said that I would fill in for it.
Well, okay, then I'll pass on my reflection and pass it over to you.
Sure.
Supervisor Jensen.
All right, awesome. So, I received a phone call a couple hours ago to ask if I could fill in on short notice for today's moment of reflection due to some unforeseen circumstances. I immediately agreed, hung up the phone, and then panicked for a second. Fortunately, it was only a second because I am an educator, and the first thing you learn as an educator is how to think on your feet. I started my teaching career in Guayaquil, Ecuador, a place I called home for nearly 4 years. I'm lucky to have had the opportunity to travel and to live in different places around the world, and would like to share a short excerpt from the book, The Art of Travel, by Alain de Botton. What I will share is actually a quote from the famous French author Gustave Flaubert. Flaubert, who is most well known for his novel Madame Bovary, shares his feelings on returning to his birth country of France after spending time living in Egypt. I am no more modern than ancient, no more French than Chinese. The idea of a native country, that is to say, the imperative to live on one bit of ground marked red or blue on the map and to hate the other bits in green or black, has always seemed to me narrow-minded, blinkered, and profoundly unwise. I am a soul brother to everything that lives, to the giraffe and the crocodile as much as to man. The author of the book follows this quote by saying, "We are, all of us, without ever having any say in the matter, scattered at birth by the wind onto various countries. But like Flaubert, we are in adulthood granted the freedom imaginatively to recreate our identity in line with our true allegiances." Flaubert's message is important today as it was when it was written originally in the 1800s. We are living in a political climate that divides us. Every day we see the terrifying examples of the way climate change is affecting our world. I encourage all of you to travel as you create your own identity. Spend time in nature. Visit our county parks and Beaver Creek Reserve to truly understand why our job as a county board to protect these places is so important. Break out of your comfort zone. Explore a new city, state, or country. Get to know the people there. I promise you will see that we all have many more similarities than differences.
Thank you. At this point, we need to establish a quorum. I ask that you take your keypads and indicate your presence. It's going to take a moment. Unplug.
Well, there's something wrong.
We have established a quorum present, 24 individuals. Before we move into public comment, to a lot of people's surprise, I'm up here. Obviously, this is the first time sitting here, learning out about all this technology. I ask for your patience and your tolerance as we work our way through this agenda. Next thing is public comments. Excuse me. Oh, excuse me. Journal of Proceedings is before us. Can I have a motion on the Journal of Proceedings? Supervisor DeLuca, Supervisor Miller seconds it. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. In the opinion of the chair, it passed unanimously. Now we can move on to a public comment period. This is a time where we as supervisors get an opportunity to listen. Speakers are allowed up to 3 minutes. When they come to the mic, I'd ask that they state their name for the record. We'll call them in the order of them signing up, and we'll also have a person on deck so that we can move it along as fast as possible. Kippy, you're first up there. If you'd come up to the podium right here, the mic is on for you, and on deck would be Andrea. And if Andrea, if you just want to get up over on the side there, we'd be ready to go. Welcome.
Thank you. I have been an Eau Claire County resident for the past 50 years. I grew up here. I raised my children here. I have suffered anxiety and depression my entire life. I have been prescribed antidepressants and anti-anxiety pharmaceuticals and have received little relief. Side effects have outweighed the benefits for me, and I turned to marijuana for relief. In 1993, my brother and only sibling disappeared, and 2 long years later, we learned that he had been murdered by drug dealers in Jackson County. He had been bludgeoned to death with a 2x4 and his body burned in a bonfire located on the murderer's property. None of his remains were found or ever returned to us. His murderer will be mandatorily released from prison next year. I have often thought that if marijuana was legal, he would still be here with me, and if the drug war was actually effective, the murderer would remain in prison. Because of this experience, I suffer severe PTSD, and in an effort to avoid potentially dangerous drug dealers, I opted to grow my own marijuana for personal medicinal use. In 2009, my husband and I were arrested and jailed for growing our own marijuana. We were not drug dealers, we were not selling. The most dangerous thing about marijuana are the laws prohibiting its use. There are no recorded deaths from marijuana, and the severity of punishment is ridiculous, considering the non-toxic nature of the plant. We see the growing popularity of CBD products and many states moving to legalize marijuana, both medically and recreationally. I love my community, and Eau Claire will always be home to me. I hope that you will vote to allow the question of marijuana decriminalization on the ballot to allow residents a voice in this issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Andrea. No clapping, please. On deck is Victoria.
Good afternoon. My name is Andrea Phillips. I'm 38 years old. Eau Claire had been my hometown for over 11 years. I transferred back to Minnesota for personal reasons for 3 years, and I'm back. But on coming back, I had joined Minnesota Normal Party, Minnesota Marijuana Now organizations. I've done a lot of organization dealings and scouting, lots of different parades just to have everybody know that this isn't a war on drugs. It's a war on human rights and what we should be able to use as medicine in our bodies. I have been on slews of medication. I have PTSD. I have high anxiety panic disorder. I come back to my hometown and kids that were calling me mom are high on meth and heroin. And it's hard seeing so many people I knew that were teenagers now as adults having their kids gone because of the heroin meth epidemic, and there shouldn't be one. And I know many counties and cities in states who have legalized regularly, like recreational or medicinal. And drug rates, hardcore drug rates, have gone down astronomically. And I'm just, I'm hoping that this can push through to this county. It's been part of Madison County since the beginning of time. And I just want to see people get better. And this is a medicine. God grew it. We should be able to utilize it, as the Bible states. He gave every person, every seed-bearing fruit for us to utilize. And it's a flower, and it's a plant, and it's a fruit. It's not a drug. I'd like to thank you for my time. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea. Victoria and Lisa on deck.
Hi, my name's Victoria Capper, and I have never been a marijuana user. I've never had a desire to do that. I've never wanted to grow it. I've never wanted to see my kids use it. 4 years ago, my brother-in-law came down with Parkinson's. 4 years ago, my life changed. My thoughts, my process, everything changed on what marijuana can offer. If any of you get a chance, please go on YouTube and please look up under Parkinson's and CBD use and THC use. I think you'll be amazed, and you'll all of a sudden understand why it's very important that veterans, elderly, my age, which is 59, I can make changes too, we all can, why we should give our kids the chances, give our people in this county chances to use this and not go to jail for it. March 18th, I was out riding my horse. My horse slipped on the ice and fell on me. Broke 5 ribs, broke my hip, crushed the top of my hip, broke my femur, blew out my knee, broke my tibia in 1 spot, my fibia in 2 spots, ankle in 8 spots. That was on March 18th. I started taking CBD oil. I took 100 milligrams every day. By my 2nd week, I had to go back in, have x-rays. They were afraid to touch me. I'm like, no problem, I'll move around. If any of you have ever had a broken rib, try 5. Didn't bother me because CBDs does take away that pain and inflammation. It does seal you. I was at the Mayo Clinic. They have another little study they're doing, and I'm on that study of how well I can move, change. My bones healed so quickly and so fast, unfortunately for me, that I'm now, not quite a whole inch shorter on my right leg. But my limping that's just tiny bit. I really believe it's the CBDs, it's the cannabidiol. There's 100 different cannabidiols in marijuana. It's not just marijuana. You can get healthy. You don't have to get high. Please give the people of this county an opportunity to make that choice for themselves. Once again, my name is Vicki. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Lisa, Abby on deck.
Hello, my name is Lisa Gore. I'm a resident of Eau Claire County. I'm a mother of 4, a daughter of a veteran, and a community educator. I've worked for several different spaces and have been in the educational space. After my dad was diagnosed with terminal cancer 16 years ago, I started to seek alternatives to help him with his pain management. He had chronic pain and chronic pain that was due to his surgeries and due to his cancer treatments. And in all of those treatments, they couldn't find a real cure for his pain. And so as his only daughter, I started looking for alternatives. I started researching this and found that in the last 5 years, I started to better understand the differences of cannabis, cannabidiol, cannabinoids and discovered that, just as Vicki was stating, there are over 100 known cannabinoids in the hemp and cannabis plant that actually feed a system that we have in our bodies that currently only 2% of medical schools are currently teaching. And that's called the endogenous cannabinoid system. In this system, it actually helps balance all of your other systems. And so it's hard to have people that you care for that are unable to go to a doctor and have a route to balance the system. I urge you to learn more about the endocannabinoid system. It's an ECS. There's tons of research worldwide on what the cannabis plant can do for our bodies. I know, looking out at all your faces, and I see people in front of me, and every single one of you have family, friends, yourself, that have been affected by debilitating illness, cancer, diabetes, fibromyalgia, autoimmune diseases. The list goes on and on. I urge you to educate yourself. I currently hold classes every week throughout the state of Wisconsin, educating people in knowing more about this endogenous cannabinoid system so they can make informed decisions, and that's why I'm here in front of you today. 5 years ago, I also adopted 2 children, one of which was highly medicated, and medicated so much so that his hands would shake because he was so medicated. Over the last few years, with doctor's supervision, we have taken him off of his medications and is currently now only using CBD. So thank you for your time, and please consider giving the voice and the choice to our people.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you.
Abby, Ben on deck.
Hi, thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Abby Testerberg, and I appreciate very much that you talked about traveling. So I'm not from your county. I'm actually a resident of River Falls, Wisconsin, and spent quite a bit of time in St. Croix County with the referendum. I was born and raised in River Falls. I went to school in Madison, and I now have returned to River Falls. My husband and I have an ancillary cannabis company that we left Wisconsin for to start in Oregon. We've subsequently started another cannabis company with a pharmacist where we work with cannabis education, discussing endocannabinoid system, and working to help patients with proper dosaging, interactions, contraindications, what have you. Lastly, we've returned to the River Falls area under the Industrial Hemp Pilot Program. I would like to kind of talk about hemp versus cannabis because I have heard a few people discussing CBD, and one of the issues we had in St. Croix County was that the board said, well, you already have CBD, you have legal access, so we don't really need to deal with this issue. THC is one of the other cannabinoids that isn't CBD that is pretty much what's at play here and what is illegal. CBD and THC and all of these 60, 70 cannabinoids have various beneficial effects. They have various side effects. The side effect we don't like about THC is that it makes you high. It also does a variety of very important beneficial things for people with various disease states. And so what we're really asking for here is to discuss access to THC in the same vein that we have access to CBD. And quite frankly, our access to CBD in this state is limited. And so what we really need to do is work on what that regulation looks like to improve safety, accessibility, and affordability of cannabis to our constituents. Very quickly, if I have a couple seconds, the other two things that the board in St. Croix County discussed was that they didn't feel like this was an issue that they needed to cover. So as supervisors of public policy, this most certainly is a public policy issue. Cannabis public policy affects all of the agencies that you oversee. In St. Croix County, it seemed as though it was this desire to stamp of approval of those agencies versus actually supervise them and make sure that what constituents find important is what the agencies find important. Lastly was that they didn't feel there was a compelling sort of need from their constituency. We've seen multiple people up here talking about a compelling need to be able to have a safe place to talk about cannabis. It's illegal. The people that I interface with weekly asking about access to medical cannabis are afraid to talk about it, and we need to provide them a safe place to be able to just say, yes, this is something that I need or want, because it's very scary to talk about this in public. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Abby. Ben, Andrew, you're on deck.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Ben Plunkett. I'm here tonight as the political director of the Wisconsin Homegrown Voters PAC. We are a Wisconsin registered political action committee that advocates for medical, recreational, agricultural, and allowing residents to grow their own marijuana for personal consumption. The discussion of marijuana legalization as public policy is broad and includes many more questions than are before the board tonight. But the question before the board tonight is simply whether or not we allow the public to have a voice in this discussion. And while I find the discussion of many of these other subjects fascinating, the drug war as a role of being the new Jim Crow, for example, in modern society, it is not really the place or 3 minutes the time to have those discussions, but rather to encourage all of you to let the public have a voice in what they feel public policy towards marijuana legalization should be in the state of Wisconsin. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I appreciate your time tonight.
Thank you, Ben. Andrew and Tricia on deck.
Hi there. Thank you very much for the chance to speak tonight. My name is Andrew Heisel, and I am a volunteer for the Wisconsin Justice Initiative. We're a nonprofit dedicated to criminal justice reform. I'm just here, I'm not actually from the area, so I'm here to give you a perspective on what's happening around the country and also the state. There's 31 states that have legalized medicinal cannabis. There's 9 states that have legalized it recreationally. The most recent state to legalize cannabis was Oklahoma, which was just 2 months ago. Citizens Initiative, 58% to 43%, despite the proponents of it being outspent 4-1. Canada is legalizing it as of this fall. Michigan's expected to fully legalize it this fall. Illinois is expected to legalize it in the spring. The following counties around the state have already agreed to put this on the ballot this fall: Brown, Dane, La Crosse, Marathon, Milwaukee, Portage, Rock, Sauk, City of Racine, City of Waukesha. I know Kenosha, Lincoln, and Forest are talking about it tonight, and Langlade is tomorrow night. So there's a lot going on. There's definitely a trend to give voters a chance to talk about, to express their opinion this fall. I think there is precedent that this does make a difference at the state level. I've heard some people say, what's the point? It's advisory. Massachusetts in 2016 had a series of advisory referendum at the local level. The legislature looked at the overwhelming support that was expressed and passed a statewide law legalizing cannabis, complete legalization. I want to say too, just on the medicinal front, there are 72,000 overdoses last year of opioids. There was only 15,000 in cocaine and 15,000 for heroin. Cannabis is a really good, it's a viable alternative for opioids. I think just that statistic alone and the fact there were 800 of those 72,000 overdoses were in Wisconsin really is a powerful reason to consider giving voters a chance to weigh in on this, because again, that's all you're voting to do tonight, is to give voters an opportunity to weigh in on whether they feel that cannabis should be made legal in the state of Wisconsin. So thanks very much for your time.
Thank you, Andrew. Tricia, on deck, Brian.
Hello, my name is Tricia Buckles. I was born and raised in the Chippewa Valley, and I have lived in Eau Claire for 10 years. I have never smoked marijuana. I have never even really seen marijuana in person. But I know that it is an amazing plant that God has given us. And the CBD that I do use for my family comes from hemp. And I have seen personally what effect it has given my own family, helping with anxiety and headaches and pain. Even my own pets take CBD. But I am very upset about the fact that I have personal friends and family who are suffering from things like cancer and ALS and post-traumatic stress disorder, and they cannot use medical marijuana because it is illegal in this state. And we need to be able to have a voice to discuss this openly and without fear of reprisal, to be able to say, it's okay to use this. It's not about smoking and getting high. It's about using that THC to help our bodies heal. So I am a big supporter of it, and I hope that we will be given the opportunity to discuss that in an open forum and be able to vote this into legalization. Thank you.
Thank you, Tricia. Ryan?
Hi, I'm Ryan. I grew up in Eau Claire. I now reside in Chippewa Falls. I guess I wasn't planning on talking, but I came here and I wanted to let you know that my grandmother passed away just recently, and she had some pretty bad arthritis in her hands. For the last probably 5-6 years, I've watched her go downhill. I did go to Colorado. I smoked marijuana in Colorado. It gets you high, yeah. It's better than alcohol, I don't know. A lot of different arguments people could give you. I guess that's why everybody's here. They kind of want to hear everybody else's voice on what their opinion is on it. My opinion is I wish that I could have given my grandmother a brownie. I mean, I went there and I tried a brownie, and it kind of made me just sit on the couch and just kind of go, oh man, you know. And I can't imagine. She would sit there with her hands like this and just, she couldn't really do nothing. And you know, and then when they're passing away, you know, you see, if anybody's ever seen a grandparent pass away, you know, all 4 of mine went with the whole morphine and the whole lorazepam down that whole road, you know, and I think the THC would have been a better idea, you know. It wouldn't have made her puke. The Vicodin, she hated that. She got grumpy. She just, Tramadol, not good at all. You know, it doesn't really help anything. I just really think the brownie would have helped her, and I really hope that you at least can put it on the referendum. I'd love to hear your voices. You know, I'd love to hear everybody's voice, and if it just takes that one vote, I'd be happy with that. And I appreciate your time. Thanks.
Thank you, Ryan. That concludes those that signed up. Were there any that didn't get an opportunity to sign up that wish to speak? Seeing none, I'll close the comment period and move on with our agenda. Next on our agenda, we have the oral report from our administrator, Catherine.
Thank you, and I'll conduct my report from this spot. I have no visuals. On August 14th, the board was emailed a link to the survey. This is the regular budget survey that is put out by the Finance and Budget Committee. We would ask that you disseminate that survey to different folks that you know, whose email contacts you have, encouraging people to take the survey. It is one medium by which we are able to gain insight regarding what is important to the citizens. The second item, which you were actually sent this evening, is in regard to an instrument called POLCO. Eau Claire County currently has the POLCO system on a pilot basis. We are not currently paying for it, and we are utilizing it as a means of obtaining additional input on our budget process. And what you will see as you go to that link are different questions that will be posted, and you'll be able to look at the dialogue that goes with those questions. And so this is one way of looking at different ways of obtaining public input. Along with that, I also wanted to speak briefly about the budget from a high level or just the current environment, a couple of points to point out to our board. Our net new construction number was available on August 15th. It is 2.89%, which is going to equate to approximately $644,767 of new tax levy. Along with that, other numbers that we are tracking and keeping an eye on, the Consumer Price Index, this is from the Bureau of Labor Statistics as of July of 2018, had a 2.9% increase. It is an important number that we watch because we utilize that when we assess compensation and the level at which we look at whether or not the amount of the cost of living adjustment will be. Right now, in the Chippewa Valley, we have an approximate 2.9% unemployment rate, meaning we essentially have full employment in the Chippewa Valley. And so that combined with the information on the CPI create a unique scenario and situation from the standpoint of how we work to manage what we call our total reward system, and the total reward system is what the Human Resources Committee has worked with the HR department to put in place. That total reward strategy is one that includes compensation and other types of benefits, 6 in total, that individuals looking for employment are interested in having. And actually there are a number of items that are on your agenda this evening that are directly linked to that. The 6 items on our total reward strategy, the first of which is compensation, also recognition. There is an agenda item where a group of employees came together and developed a potential way that Eau Claire County can recognize its employees for exemplary service. And so you will be considering that this evening. From the compensation standpoint, one of the things that we worked into our budget projections was an approximate 2% increase cost of living adjustment. That is based on a number of factors, primarily the CPI and market conditions. From a benefits perspective, we have also managed to obtain health insurance again this year for a 4.4% overall county increase. There's a slight difference between that increase countywide and what you're seeing at the department level because of the way that those funds were allocated in prior years, meaning 2018. And so if a department has an average, it's an average of 11%, it may be more, it may be less, because it's dependent upon what the individual employees choose for their type of health insurance. But overall, it's a 4.4% increase. At the department level, it will look like a larger increase because of the way it was allocated in 2018. That 4.4% increase also includes not only the renewal premium cost, but also the monies that Eau Claire County will contribute to health insurance with the use of the difference card. The difference card, again, is the initial step at really a self-funding mechanism for just that very small portion of insurance which is covered by deductibles. And for a more in-depth explanation about the difference card, there's information on our website with our 2018 budget, but I can also resend that to the board from 2018 and also from the fact sheet that the Committee on Human Resources used when it reviewed the different proposals for health insurance. Going back then to the list of the total rewards, we also have one that is called performance management, and that is the ability for individuals to align what they value with the organization's goals. Work-life effectiveness, which is ensuring that our employees succeed in all areas, and one of the opportunities for that is also being presented by the Committee on Human Resources this evening in a change to the number of holidays that Eau Claire County offers, as well as a first reading for the hours of operation. Both are tied back to the total reward strategy. And the final item there is our talent development, which is actually a tool for providing our employees to have a pathway to continue to grow their career here in Eau Claire County. Going back to and linking anything that we do to the total reward strategy becomes an important part of the work that we do to ensure that as we're meeting the needs of our budget and the needs of our workforce. We're not leaving opportunities for retention and recruitment on the table. And that is all I have, unless there is questions from board members at this point.
Supervisor Miller.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Catherine, could you expand a little bit more on that insurance? As you know, I was very confused at 11% increase when I thought it was only 4.5%. And so, in my mind, if I'm a single person and I got a single plan, it goes up 4.5%. I had a family plan last year, it goes up 4.5%. All of a sudden, departments are told more 11%. Could you clarify that?
Yes, I can. The 4.4% is the number for the increase when you look dollar for dollar, what we paid in 2018, what we paid in 2019, for the county as a whole. When you take that and you divide it up so that in 2018, when we first put the difference card into place, one of the things that occurred is that there was funds budgeted at the department level, but then the self-funding mechanism for the difference card was actually budgeted at the higher level. And so it was actually budgeted for the county as a whole, with the idea that we would take the time in between 2018 and 2019 to talk with different entities. We actually work with CLA and others to obtain information on best practices for how we assign and align the different allocations. And what we did then with our 2019 projection is we took those numbers that were originally allocated at the countywide level and moved them down to the department level, which is why you see an increase that is larger at the department level than countywide. When we put the budget together, we tend to look at it as a whole when we're actually doing the work to pull all of the numbers together and identify opportunities and options. And so that is where you see that difference. And I tend to be visual, so if you would like to actually sit down, we could sit down and I could go over that with you as well. That would be more convenient. There's also information, I believe, in the original fact sheet the Human Resources Committee was utilizing when they made the decision that would also help show and highlight some of those differences.
Thank you.
Any other questions of our administrator? Seeing none, we'll move on to our next oral report by Supervisor Pagonis, Chair of Budget and Finance. Will be commenting about budget policies and priorities.
I will sort of be commenting on budget policies and priorities. I just want to give a snapshot of the budget process. And somewhat of an apology to the new supervisors. I came onto county board in October, right before a budget session, and all I can remember was having chaos in my head in terms of trying to understand what was going on. And so I apologize that that maybe I probably should have started earlier in terms of talking to some of the new supervisors about what to expect. So by now, each oversight committee should have reviewed the budgets for the departments for which they have oversight. So that all needed to be done by yesterday. August 20th is the date in the county code. From there, so it goes back to the county administrator and the finance director, and they review all of the budgets, and they the county administrator creates her budget recommendation. And we should get that probably in mid-September. Towards the end of September, finance and budget will start meeting with each of the departments, and we'll start reviewing each department's budget. At the end of that time, you'll each get a book that'll look similar to this. The tabs are mine, you have to do your own tabbing, and it's alphabetical by department, and it will include in it a chart that will have the county administrator's recommendation and then the recommendation from Finance and Budget Committee. So you should plan to see that around mid-October. Then we as a county board review it at our annual meeting, and that's when we approve the budget for next year. So pretty much by definition, the budget is the primary policy document of the county. It's through the budget, how we allocate funding, that we determine what our priorities are and we determine what our policies are. So this is how I'm sort of winding into to what it says on the agenda. I'm going to talk about policies. So our primary goal is to look at our budget and evaluate and assess it based on our strategic goals. And we want to align our budget priorities with our strategic goals. And so we have to keep in mind always what our strategic plan is and where our commitment is. So one of our first priorities are making sure that we have the necessary services available to the community. And everyone has a different definition of necessary services. Some people think it's smooth highways. Some people think it's having mental health services available to adults. Some people think it's having programming through the Aging and Disability Resource Center. We have the Register of Deeds who keeps track of all of our housing ownership. So we have a lot of very, very essential programs, and the vast majority of them are by statute. We have other programs that are not statutory, but we do them because we think it's a good idea. For example, the treatment courts. So we pay for the treatment courts because we think it's smart. We think it's a good practice, not because we're required. So part of this is keeping in mind that a county delivers statewide services. The county is the delivery arm for services that are put out by the state. And so the state doesn't require us to do treatment courts. It does require us to have a register and probate and register of deeds. So that's the variation there. So most of what we do is statutory. So then we have to think through necessary services and the extent to which we're going to be providing these, and that's where it comes into the performance management that Administrator Schauf was discussing. So in providing these different services, then our second priority, our second budgetary policy is that we have to maintain a certain amount of fiscal restraint. I mean, just think about it, 11% increase in health insurance is a really big number. And, you know, we don't have a lot more revenue coming in. We're estimating about $644,000 increase in property tax levy due to new construction. So it's not that big of a number. There are some departments, I was going to say, I won't say which one, but it's the Sheriff's Department. They're asking for $1.5 million. Just saying. So we need to think some of that through. We also need to keep in mind some of our most expensive cases in Eau Claire County's child protection. And when you think about removing 3 kids from a home and placing them in foster care at $40 a day, 7 days a week, we start providing services to those parents. Those services have a cost associated with them. We need to do that. We want to do that. The parents are often appointed attorneys so that they go to court. That's all funded through state funding and our funding for the courts. So they become very, very expensive cases, but we need to do that. Those are areas where we really don't have a lot of choices, or we don't think we have a lot of choices. And of course, the drug epidemics, cannabis notwithstanding, is wreaking havoc. And the methamphetamine epidemic is wreaking havoc. So these are also things to think about. So we need to attempt to balance our budget based on the revenues we have compared to the needs we have and what we think makes sense. So we encourage each department to consider seriously what is important and to start looking at how each department determines what they need to do and the extent to which they fund things. So then another one of the priorities we have, and this will make a lot of sense because we're going to talk about Beaver Creek, the county has some physical assets. This building we're in, for example, we have the Ag Center, and then of course we have a wonderful gem in Beaver Creek. And so we have a commitment to maintain these resources and to consider how we're going to not let them just not pay attention to them, but that we're going to continue to keep them as vital resources for our county. So these are all different things that we as a committee are working through, and they are all part of the priorities and policies that we have, that we've developed. So, so last thing, and I guess I'm late here, as oversight committees, and you're looking at your individual departments, you know, you're thinking about what's best for your department. When it comes to finance, we're looking at all of the departments. And so we have to weigh the need of parks and forests as compared to the needs of register of deeds. That's a really hard thing to do because, you know, departments have many needs, you know. They need new trucks, they need additional staff. There's just all kinds of needs that each of the departments have that they feel they need to do their business. So, having said all of that, it's going to be an extremely tough budget year, and I hope we all can keep in mind what's in the best interest of the whole county, try and move out of the silo mentality that some departments seem to have, and think through how we can work collaboratively among departments so that we can accomplish what we need to do. And I don't think I have anything else unless I forgot something.
Any questions for Supervisor Pagonis? Seeing none, thank you, Supervisor Pagonis. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Supervisor McKinney.
And thank you, Supervisor Pagonis. I appreciated your detail. And I just wanted to reiterate how a budget is also a moral document, and we think about the population that we have requirements to serve, and also, as we've heard tonight, how important the public voice is, and as we've held hearings on budget, and to get to those hearings and there's no public there, I would just really like to support the use of the survey and how important it is. I use the survey as I look and see where are people ranking the importance of the work we do. And I think that all plays into the work that we do in coming up with the budget and completing that work. So thank you.
Thank you.
Supervisor Stelzis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Quick question regarding capital. So we submitted our capital requests way back in May, was my understanding. And I know that people have been working on that, but will we get an opportunity to review that once again with the Finance Committee when we as a committee come before you?
So Finance Committee is going to look at all of the capitals right now on the September 21st agenda. However, when a department comes before the committee, because it's not committees that come before the committee, but the department, there's nothing preventing a supervisor from joining with the department. I would say there's nothing preventing a discussion about that because nothing is done until the budget is finalized. So if, for example, there's a discussion in terms of departmental priorities, that department can continue to speak to it.
Okay.
There's also nothing preventing a department from coming to the committee, finance and budget, on the day in which we review capital. So there are multiple opportunities to make the argument.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions? No, I'm not seeing any. Thank you, Supervisor Pagonis. Next on the agenda is Supervisor Dunning, who will come up here, be speaking to the state of the groundwater for Eau Claire County. You have in your packets a very comprehensive report.
As we get set up here with the PowerPoint that'll cover all 75 pages or whatever it is. But anyway, I'm going to give you a little background. Back in 2008, 2009, the Groundwater Committee was working, and there was this report out. Some of you who have been around before then would recognize this. This was put out in 1994, and Colleen Bates was chair of the committee at that time. And it was put out. And a committee started looking at it, thinking we need to update it. You know, we're a few years behind. And so we started looking at it, and we looked at it, and we thought, well, we could use this as an education purpose. Our committee was involved with doing education in the community, in the school district, and we wanted this to be a supplement to it. And we also wanted it to be of some value to developers or anybody that's in the county that was expecting to build something that would look at it and say, okay, this is what we want to do as far as groundwater. So we spent those few years looking at this. And then in 2011, as we're about to put this package together, we get sand mines. Sand mines brought a whole different look to what we were doing. All of a sudden, we look at that and we find that we don't have answers to some of the questions that we needed to answer. And even though there was a moratorium, we didn't have information that we could do to, in some cases, to make good decisions. So we recognized this and we started working on that. And so we continued to work on this throughout the years and started looking at other counties. We went to Chippewa County. They had just gotten a grant to write a plan like this, somewhere in the several $100,000 range. We went to Portage County, which was renewing their plan. And then we looked at other counties within the state here in Wisconsin as well as in Minnesota. And then we started working with the other resources that we had available. We were with the geology department at UWEC, with the environmental public health program at the U, the DNR, West Central Wisconsin Regional Planning Commission, UW Stevens Point helped us, the Wisconsin Geological Survey, and the USGS. We were getting information from all these people and trying to put all this together. We even had some of the students using us as a project for their class. They would write papers and get credit for it, and then we'd get the information, and the intent was to put some of this in, and a couple of them did make it into it. And then in 2015, we completed a draft, and one of the students who used their community service requirement, which was 30 hours of work for something in the community, she was able to use that as to write what it turns out to be Appendix A in your book, and to put all that together. I mean, much of that was bringing it there, and she ended up with an online version. And at that point, we ended up with the county having a lot of staff changes. We lost people in the P&D and in the city county health department. The DNR staff persons left. The UWEC staff persons left, and we even had committee members leaving. So we ended up kind of getting put on hold. And then once those were done, we ended up with, by the time we got back to full strength again, we had some more issues showing up. We had nitrate contaminations that the health department was monitoring. We had the Eau Claire River watershed project, where that report was being finalized and telling us what we needed to do to keep the watershed healthy. And of course, watersheds are connected to groundwater, so you end up with all of that. We also had CAFOs, large animal confined operations. We had other pharmaceuticals, which we were starting to find in water, and other contaminants. We also, at that point, were able to get a hold of some well monitoring equipment so we could measure the fluctuation in wells. We'd put this well and tell device on a well, and over the year we could measure live action of what the water was doing within the well, so we could get an idea of how much fluctuation there was. And so we were working with this as well as getting water usage information. Even our sand mines now are starting to provide this information to us because that was one of the things we asked. And then in 2017, we set up a subcommittee that was made up of the Wisconsin Regional Planning, the DNR, UWEC, Land Conservation, the City County Health Department, P&D, and some of the committee members. And they started working on this report, spending a lot of time. 2 weeks ago it was finished. A week ago it was taken to the planning and development, and tonight it's here. So we'd like to, now I'm going to give it to Audrey, and she's going to go through some slides and tell you about what we're planning with this. So.
Thank you, Jim. Make sure that we can get our slides, get the slides to show up. Do I need to click something?
It's your computer right now that's showing, so.
Not quite.
Just check your plug-in again, just to see.
I promise we tested this and it was working perfectly earlier. Isn't that how these things go?
Is that your front screen?
The wonders of technology.
That is my desktop. Try this one.
Something's happened. There. Huh?
Okay, so now we have the live picture. There we go. Okay. Okay, thank you for your patience. Thank you for that introduction, Jim. My name is Audrey Berner. I'm a project manager at the City County Health Department, and I serve as staff to our Groundwater Advisory Committee. And I'm here on behalf of the committee to just go through some of the general recommendations that are in the report. Not all 70-some pages or so this evening, but to just talk through some of our general recommendations and give you an idea of how those came up to the surface as we were going through this process of working on the report. So a few topics that you'll see in the report, some just general information, of course, about what we know about groundwater already. A lot of that is unchanged from our 1994 report. Water doesn't move all too quickly in this county, but it does also talk about some of the new things that we've learned in the last 25 years, which was part of the need for an update to this report as well. We talk about land use trends, of course, water testing and programming, which also has changed over the last several decades. Groundwater quality, quantity, and how we expect those things to change or not change as we start thinking about climate change and some of those anticipated outcomes and what it means for our natural environment, including groundwater. So we separated our priority recommendations into 3 categories, and there's just a small nuance here between A and B. So groundwater quality goals, groundwater quantity goals, and then our goals for education and sharing with the public as well. So a few things we wanted to talk about when it comes to quantity then. One thing that, like Jim mentioned, in order to keep up with our neighbors to the north, Chippewa County, but also to have a better understanding here in Eau Claire County, was to have a more focused effort on developing a comprehensive countywide groundwater flow model within the next 2 years. This will be something that's really helpful for us to understand where our groundwater is, how much there is of it, and what that system of groundwater or surface water going into groundwater and groundwater being pumped out looks like. And it's important because this is really, and this is showing up terribly on the screen, so I apologize, but this is what you can consider our current groundwater quantity model. It's almost as old as I am, and it's just a general idea of flow directions of groundwater in our county. Not very helpful for our changing land use, for our changing quality issues, and also when we're trying to think about what it looks like for the future of groundwater in our county. This static picture of groundwater from the early 90s is tremendously unhelpful. So one of our motivating factors for pushing for a computerized groundwater model. Another groundwater quantity goal then is to think more, or to look more closely at our existing ordinances and regulations, especially where they relate to subdivisions and high capacity wells, so we can get a better understanding of how we are protecting our groundwater, if it's sufficient, and if not, how we can do a better job at that. One other thing then that relates to groundwater quality now is thinking about part of that systematic look at groundwater is to test, do more testing and get a better diagnostic of the current state of our groundwater quality. Some of the things that we especially want to look for in Eau Claire County are things that we already do test for at the health department that include nitrate and bacteria and other emerging contaminants. As we learn more about potential groundwater contaminants, it helps us to have a better idea of potential risks for different areas of the county, not only to groundwater quality, but also to public health and safety, and to the quality of our water that we use for industry, that we use for agriculture as well. A picture of that then is some of the current data that we have for groundwater testing. This, and I apologize that the screen is cut off here, but you'll find in your packets a few different maps. This is a map of our nitrate results that we have throughout the county. We only have nitrate results for about 50% of the wells in our county, so there's a lot of unknown information out there right now. And it shows that the highlighted areas are different watersheds across the county, and shows how we have watersheds with higher numbers of tests and watersheds where we just don't have as much information. And it would be helpful to be able to test systematically across the county so we can really get a better idea of what that picture looks like across our county for nitrate and bacteria and other contaminants. Another groundwater quality issue that we identified is having a better awareness of some groundwater environmentally sensitive areas, whether those areas are due to residential, high-density residential land use, whether they're due to industrial land use, mining or agriculture, other uses, and to have a better idea of what are those sensitive areas that we can better protect them, and again, better understand potential health risks for our people, but also for our planet and our prosperity, the triple bottom line. And then again, related to groundwater quality, much like quantity, be sure that our regulations are really protecting groundwater in the way that we see it as a valuable resource in this county. Again, related not only to industry and agriculture, but also to where we live, where we work, and where we play, and high density residential as well. One of those specific recommendations then is to update the existing animal waste storage ordinance to incorporate more of the performance standards that come with the DNR rule, NR 151. And I'll touch on that here just very briefly, and unfortunately I don't think that the contrast will be very good here, but you'll see in your packet a map of the groundwater in, areas that are susceptible to contamination. Most of that area of the county is highlighted as potentially susceptible to contamination. That definition is within NR 151 and is very nuanced. It has to do with distance to wells and also makeup of soil types. So not something I'll go into here, but in general, we have a very sandy county. It's easy for things on the surface to get underground in a very sandy county. And so we want to be able to understand some of those nuances across the county and have a better idea about how to protect some of those sensitive or susceptible areas. And then moving on to our third category of recommendations is groundwater education. One very simple low-hanging fruit that we've already had some student help with a number of years ago that we'd like to kind of wrap up and put a nice bow on is to complete a county groundwater website that would just have some basic information about groundwater principles in general, but also specifically what we know about Eau Claire County groundwater and some of the special issues or special assets that we have in this county. We also want to share more information with folks that live in rural areas and are served by private wells or on-site septic systems. And so one of those outreach outputs would be a fact sheet or some sort of materials that we could provide to homeowners, but also to realtors and to builders to make sure everyone's on the same page about what maybe you're getting into when you move into a home with a private well if you haven't had that sort of experience before, how to protect yourself and also how to protect the resource that we all share. In addition to in the groundwater education category, we like to share more of our local water testing results. Like I said, we do have quite a lot of information. There's quite a lot more information that could be gathered, however, and there are some testing results that are already publicly available, some that are not, that we would like to be able to find a valuable and accessible way to share more broadly. And then, of course, this is not something that as a committee or as a group we ever intended to do ourselves, so it definitely requires increasing partnerships with our towns, our villages, and other municipalities so we can work as a group to better understand how to keep our resources safe, how to keep our people healthy, and how to help continue to understand this changing resource and kind of our changing landscape with increased testing and monitoring. And then our last groundwater education bullet point was to develop fact sheets or more information to understand who has what regulatory responsibility for groundwater protection across the county. And it might seem like a bit of a bizarre sort of goal, but you'll see in Appendix E of the report a really confusing flow chart about how we understand whose wells are whose. What responsibilities do private well owners have? What about small business owners, churches, schools, gas stations, restaurants, all the way up to municipalities? There's different groups, or there are different responsibilities by each of those groups depending on how their well is classified, and that's determined by the number of people that it serves, among some other categories. So we wanted to be able to make it more available and accessible to the public about what those different regulations and responsibilities look like depending on the types of wells and their users. So finally, when is this all going to happen? And again, I apologize that this slide was cut off, but on the top side of our timeline here, we're talking just about groundwater quantity goals. So within 2019, we'd like to start to spend more time looking at grant sources for that groundwater flow model. As Jim alluded to, it's not a cheap project, but there are people in the state, experts in the state, that are willing to do the work if we're willing to find the money. And so that will be a project in and of itself. And then by the end of 2019, review existing regulations. In 2020, hopefully by the end of 2020, be able to complete that groundwater flow model. And then by the end of 2022, so about 3.5 years from now, explore whether additional regulations are needed based on kind of the current status quo that model would provide us, but also future forecasts that model would provide us as well. So those are our quantity goals. Our quality goals then mirror those very closely. In the short term, so within 2019, update the animal waste storage ordinance to those, or with the NR 151 standards. Review existing regulations by the end of next year. What isn't specifically mentioned on here, but is sort of understood, is again finding some grant sources or funding sources to be able to do additional testing, and then complete more systematic countywide testing and defining of those groundwater environmentally sensitive areas. And then by the end of 2021, beginning of 2022, explore additional regulations if or as needed based on those results. So who have we involved, or who really has a stake in all of this? I think it's easy to start at the bottom of the list and really say the general public. That breaks down into our cities, our villages, our city county health department certainly has a number of goals within this report as well because of our testing and programming that we do, and of course planning and development has a close tie-in as well. But we are all users of groundwater in one way or another in this county, and it's a very precious resource, and so we're very interested in being able to better understand and better protect it in the near and long term.
Thank you.
Thank you, Audrey. Jim, is there
any questions?
Supervisor Coffey?
I would just like to commend this group for the work that they have done. I came in at the end of this committee as a new member, and I'm just amazed at the wonderful work they've done and put together this report. And it still is startling to me how little we know about the quantity and quality of our water. So I really think it's important that we take these recommendations to heed and really work carefully, because knowing this will help us better with zoning, to know how large a lot size,
houses should be out in the country, industrial things that are coming in, as well as the agricultural decisions about animal waste and citation authority. So thank you very much for your work.
One of the things that these reports, that we get, and we're getting some information from our Wisconsin Geological Survey, is coming up with a susceptibility map. Basically, that in Section B, you've got a whole variety of maps. And what that does, as I understand it anyway, is that it takes those maps and puts them on top of each other. And then through GIS, you can determine any particular size of measurement that you want. You want to go to a 40-acre plot, you can get all of that information on that 40 acres, for availability. So it will be able to help with the planning and with that. So that's that would, give us all of those things that we need. So that would be something that would be great.
Mm-hmm.
Supervisor Stelgis?
Yeah, thank you. I like the work too. It sure looks great. In the last couple weeks, I heard from two separate people telling me that there has been an outbreak of well contamination near the landfill. Is there any truth to that?
Which landfill?
The 7 Mile Creek.
I'm not
aware.
I'm not personally aware of anything.
Okay.
Yeah.
It just sounds like rumor to me, but I thought you might know. Thank you.
Well, that's pretty well monitored because I believe it's surrounded by test wells.
Yes, it is. Mm-hmm.
So.
I don't see anybody else. Thank you, Supervisor Dunning and Audrey.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks,
Audrey. You have next your written reports that are in your packet just for your review. Your 2018 contingency fund report and your quarterly report from the Chippewa Valley Regional Airport. Next on our agenda is presentation of petitions and claims and communications. First, we have a proclamation for National Suicide Prevention Awareness Month. I'll read the proclamation and then I'll be asking for a motion for approval. Whereas September is known around the United States as National Suicide Prevention Awareness Month, and his intent is to help promote awareness surrounding each of the suicide prevention resources available to us in our community. The simple goal is to learn how to help those around us and how to talk about suicide without increasing the risk of harm. And whereas suicidal thoughts can affect anyone regardless of age, gender, race, orientation, income level, religion, or background, and whereas according to the CDC, each year more than 41,000 people die by suicide, whereas suicide is the 10th leading cause of death among adults in the U.S. and the 2nd leading cause of death among people ages 10 to 24. And whereas the suicide rate per 100,000 is higher in Eau Claire County than the state and U.S. rate, and whereas 44 people have died by suicide in Eau Claire County since January 1st, 2016. Whereas in 2017, 29% of Eau Claire high schoolers and 22% of middle schoolers reported they felt so sad and hopeless almost every day for 2 weeks or more in a row that they stopped doing some usual activities. And 48% of our high schoolers reported having significant problems with feeling anxious, nervous, tense, scared, or like something bad is going to happen. Whereas local organizations like Eau Claire Healthy Communities Mental Health Action Team, Prevent Suicide Chippewa Valley, Eau Claire County Suicide Death Review Team, and Mental Health Matters are on the front lines to find ways to work to collaboratively to decrease the stigma, raise awareness, increase resilience, collect, analyze data, support mental health access and treatment, and intervene early. And whereas question, persuade, and response training, evidence-based approach on how to respond to someone having suicidal thoughts, has been provided to 2,864 adults and adolescents in our community. Whereas our community has prioritized mental health as the #1 priority in the 2018 Eau Claire County Community Health Assessment, and whereas every member of our community should understand throughout life struggles we all need the occasional reminder that we are silently fighting our own battles. Whereas all residents are encouraged to take the time as to the well-being of their family, friends, and neighbors over the next few days and genuinely convey their appreciation for their existence by any gesture they deem appropriate. A simple phone call, message, handshake, or a hug can go a long way towards helping someone realize that suicide is not the answer. Now, therefore, I, Gerald Wilkie, on behalf of the Eau Claire County Board of Supervisors, hereby proclaim the month of September 2018 as National Suicide Prevention Awareness Month. Can I have a motion? Motion by Mark Beckfield, Supervisor Chronic seconds it. I'll call for a voice vote on this. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, same side. In the opinion of the chair, it passed unanimously. We move on to our first readings of ordinance. I apologize, Supervisor Jansen.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Thank you. I just wanted to point out I am proud to serve on the West Central Wisconsin Planning Commission, and at the beginning of this month you all should have received a packet that has a bunch of materials about the West Central Wisconsin Planning Commission. I really encourage you all just to take the time to look over these materials. If you misplace them, they are available online on the county's website. It just has the annual reports that highlight some of the great work that this organization has been doing. We heard from Supervisor Dunning that they were helping out on that groundwater project. We talked previously in a previous meeting about the revolving loan fund. With that, in 2017, they were able to give out 10 loans that kept 71 jobs in Eau Claire County. And then lots of work with transportation, safe routes to school, and things like that. The resource that's in there that I find the most helpful is this little packet of how can we help. It describes all of the services that they offer, and so as you're working with your committees and you're trying to figure these things out, take a second and look at this, because West Central Wisconsin Regional Planning Commission might have some resources and be able to help you in those projects. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Jensen, and my apologies. You warned me before the meeting that you did have communication, and I had a note there, didn't pay attention to my own note. Supervisor Stelgis.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to also make just a brief announcement. This past week, there was an interesting new addition to public land space that has been in the works for, I think, quite some time in the town of Union. I don't know if Supervisor Mowry knows that the land trust, formerly known as West Wisconsin Land Trust, now called Landmark Conservancy, I think, put together a collaborative effort to purchase a parcel from Kiwanis, and I think Supervisor Knight was actually the representative for Kiwanis on that. But it's along the bluffs on the Chippewa River, so it was a combined 40-acre addition that will, I think, ultimately end up in the town of Union, but the county stewardship program contributed to that. The DNR, the town of Union, some private donations, as well as the land trust. And so I would encourage people to go out. It will be adjacent to the current town of Union Park. It's a perched sand dune site overlooking the Chippewa River, and it's quite spectacular. And it has some interesting geological and archaeological features as well.
Thank you. Anybody else with communication? Seeing none, then I'll move on. First reading of ordinances by committee. File number 181955, brought to us by Committee on Human Resources.
To amend section 2.09.010A of the code.
That'll come back at our September meeting. Brought to us by Committee on Planning and Development, file 181922.
To to amend section 18.60.040 of the code, definitions, and to amend section 1860.110D4 of the code, district regulations.
That also will come back in September. Brought to us by Committee on Finance and Budget, file number 181952.
Amending section 4.15.010A of the code, fees of professional examiners and witnesses, and chapter 51 involuntary commitment proceedings.
You'll act on that one in September. Moving on to item 11, reports of standing committees, commission boards under 2.04.160, and second reading of ordinances. So we have from Committee on Administration 1819-34.
This ordinance makes changes to the Eau Claire County Code, Title 8, Health and Safety.
I'm going to ask Corp Counsel to speak to that one. Oh, excuse me, first I need a motion. Supervisor Leary, seconded by Supervisor Dunning. Corp Counsel, could you speak to that one?
The fact sheet outlines what was happening here. This is part of our strategic process of going through the entire county code. Most of the changes are, we eliminated a couple of footnotes. A lot of the changes are just citation references to the administrative code or statutes. There are just a couple of sections that have a little more explanation, and those are section 4, and this is an update the sanitary code regulations, and this is as a direct result of action by the state, and basically it just changes the Wisconsin Department of Commerce to the Department of Safety and Professional Services. In section 14, there's some language change for inspection of on-site waste systems, and this is just an update of the language. And then the last three sections, section 20 concerns the holding tanks, and it allows installation of holding tanks based on lot size limitations. That previously was not a reason that there could be that could be taken into account. So basically that allows potentially, depending on a specific lot, maybe location of a holding tank that previously was not allowed. Section 21 repeals our tattoo and body piercing ordinance, and basically the reason for that is that the City County Health Department has the same authority or possibly more authority to regulate that. They are regulating that. We had discussions with Lisa Giese and some of her folks, and I'm personally satisfied that this is duplicative, and we do not need to have a tattoo and body piercing ordinance because the City County Health Department regulation covers the county. And then finally in section 22 on quarantine and disposition of rabid animals, and this is an update based on guidance provided by the Wisconsin Department of Agriculture, Trade and Consumer Protection, and also the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. And that also aligns, in this case, this is an area where we have city and county ordinances. It aligns both of the ordinances.
Any questions? Seeing none, you can vote now. Take your keypads. That passed 24 yeses and 0 noes, unanimous. We're moving on to file 181951, brought to us by Committee on Administration and by Committee on Judiciary and Law.
Directing the county clerk to place the referenda question contained in this resolution regarding legalization of cannabis on the November 6, 2018 ballot.
Can I have a motion? Motion by Supervisor Buchanan, seconded by Supervisor Jansen. Anybody wishing to speak to this? Oh, Supervisor Miller.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. As the committee, I'm speaking on behalf of the Committee on Judiciary and Law, the group that did pass it unanimously. One of the things I want to just to reiterate, which was pointed out in the fact sheet, we're not sitting here tonight discussing and or voting on a pro or con in relation to the legalization of marijuana or cannabis or whatever you want to call it. What we are simply wanting to do is move forward and put the question on the ballot for the public to give them the voice. I believe, as someone pointed out, one of our speakers earlier tonight, numerous times we have forwarded resolutions to Madison, to the legislators, to the governor, and we get no response. Well, as one of our committee members pointed out, this is just another avenue that we can add to us forwarding information and ideas to our state legislature. So, and again, we don't have any idea of going forward, the results of it, yay or nay kind of thing. But we want the individuals of Eau Claire County to be able to come forward and give us some ideas. And that's what this is all about tonight. Give the public a chance to give us some input, let them have a voice. And I think it's a right thing for us to do. So I hope you'll support it. Thank you.
Supervisor Mortis.
I'm going to withdraw my request to speak because I think I will speak beyond the issue.
Okay. Supervisor Henning.
Yes, at the administration meeting this past 4-0, it was not necessarily that it was a support of it, it was just to give the opportunity for this board to meet tonight and make their voices heard. So that passed unanimously to advance it tonight.
Supervisor McKinney.
Thank you, Supervisor Wilkie. I too sat on one of the committees that proposed passing this on for resolution for being on the ballot. And I heard earlier tonight that the 31 states have passed something for medicinal use, 9 states legalizing use. And so I think that validates for me why we should give the public an opportunity to speak to this by putting it on the ballot. Thank you.
Supervisor Buchanan.
Thank you. As is kind of a little bit pointed out already, what we're asking today is not that this board or any individual in your vote to take a specific stance on where you stand on decriminalization, either full decriminalization or for medical or even to lay it. Keep it as it is. You've heard from a lot of supporters here tonight who wanted this for some very specific reasons. You didn't hear from anyone on the other side about the issue of decriminalization, but there are people out there as well who oppose any form of decriminalization. And what I think about is so great about this resolution is it doesn't matter which side of that issue you're on. Either way, you can support this resolution because we're just asking the voters to have their say, have an opportunity to be heard. Each one of us who is sitting here tonight is sitting here because we had to win an election. We had to talk to voters, and we had to convince them why we were the right person to represent them and represent their values. There's a lot of information out there on medical and recreational cannabis. There is a lot of misinformation, there's a lot of good information, but we as a county board, through the elections we ran, have said that we value the idea of public input through democracies and through elections and through referendums where we have those elections of issues, where we will have people out there who will be saying, this is why option A is good, this is why option B is good, this is why I think you should vote for option C and keep it all illegal. That we will have people having those debates in the public arena. And so if you want to know what's going on in those other communities, is it good, is it bad? That's what this referendum allows us to do. It allows us as a public to have that discussion so people can make an informed decision. Now, another thing that you heard was all of the other counties across and cities across this state who are going to be weighing in this November. And so that goes specifically to why do this right now? What is the fierce urgency of this moment? And when the new state legislature convenes and the new or current governor is seated for the next 4 years, and they look at, and I don't know how those other referendums are going to do, I don't know how this referendum is going to do, but I do not want the leaders in Madison looking at the referendum results from across Wisconsin to make their decision without Eau Claire's voice being heard. This referendum allows Eau Claire's voice to be heard when those discussions happen this upcoming 2019. Lastly, I just wanted to say how humbled I am and how much my heart breaks for the amount of testimony that we heard today. That we heard folks who were sharing their stories. People gave very personal stories, talking about cancer, talking about violence, talking about pain, talking about death. And when they came here today, they weren't even asking us to change our own policies, our own fines, or our own fees. All they were asking for was an opportunity for them to be heard at the ballot this November. And so I just want to thank everyone who came out today for giving that testimony, and I urge my colleagues to vote yes on this referendum. Thank you.
I'm not seeing anybody else wishing to vote. It appears if you're, oops, hold it. We have Supervisor Cronick. You'd like to speak to this?
It's Kronk.
Cronick.
Although that does seem ironic at this point.
Sorry.
That's okay. I came tonight also kind of prepared to speak and thinking about my own personal views. I don't know if it's appropriate to share. I look at this as a decriminalization issue. I look at my personal experiences. I'm currently reading a book called We Are All Criminals, and it says that 1 in 4 have a criminal record, but 4 in 4 have a criminal history. And I kind of look around the room and I'm kind of wondering, has anybody else maybe been touched by this issue in many of the ways that were expressed by the various public tonight? I'm also a nurse. I look at it as a health issue. There's many ways that I can look at this issue, but again, as Supervisor Buchanan and others have said, it's not about what I think. I'm here to serve the voices of the people that I represent, and I think this needs to be on the ballot. So I will be voting yes. Thank you.
I'm not seeing anybody else. I think we're ready to vote. Please take your keypads. You will be voting on the ordinance, a resolution that is putting on the ballot the referendum, advisory referendum regarding the legalization of cannabis on the November 6th ballot. "20 yes, 4 no, the resolution passes. We're moving on to our next item. Comes to us from Committee on Administration and also Committee on Finance and Budget. It's 1819-049.
Ratifying a 10-year agreement between Eau Claire County and the Friends of Beaver Creek Reserve, Inc. for the operation of Beaver Creek Reserve, authorizing the county administrator to execute the agreement and any other necessary documents on behalf of Eau Claire County.
Supervisor Pagonis, Chair of, oh, excuse me, I need a motion first. Have a motion by Supervisor Pagonis. Thank you. Supervisor DeLuca seconds it. Supervisor Pagonis, can you speak to this as Chair of Budget and Finance?
Sure. And whatever I forget, I'm sure Supervisor DeLuca will follow up on this. The county's had a contract with the Friends of Beaver Creek for the last 5 years, and the contract has worked out very well. It was that contract's annual funding for operations at $180,000 and capital at $75,000. Having the contract did two things. It gave Beaver Creek sort of an understanding of where they would be year to year, and so they were able to do more planning. So the Friends of Beaver Creek approached the county for a 10-year contract, and the operational will be the same amount. Capital starts off at $75,000 and then will go up to $100,000 after 3 years, I guess on the 4th year. So again, it gives Beaver Creek the stability of knowing that how much the county is intending to support them, and it will give them the ability to make appropriate plans. Staff at Beaver Creek is supported by the Friends of Beaver Creek through their fundraising and through their own revenue that they're able to generate. The county owns the grounds and the building. So the county does have a significant responsibility for repairs, and I believe we can all remember just the very last meeting we voted on replacing some of the pipes there. So I encourage your support. If you haven't been out to Beaver Creek to the Butterfly House this year, it's really worth going out there. It's a lot of fun. They have lots and lots of butterflies. I personally found 7 different species, and if you haven't been to Beaver Creek for a hike, you should go.
Supervisor DeLuca and Supervisor Maury serve as our representatives on the Beaver Creek board. Do either of you wish to add anything to it? Okay, I think we're fine. Are we ready to vote, or any questions? Oh, there we are. Supervisor Mortens.
Yes, I'd like to speak a little bit. First, I'm going to say I'm well in favor of the of Beaver Creek itself. And can everybody hear me? Okay, sorry. I'm well in favor of.
Put your mic down a little.
Okay, sorry. Sore throat tonight. I'm well in favor of the mission of Beaver Creek, but I'm going to make some criticism. I've volunteered at Beaver Creek for the past 29 years. The physical grounds are in the worst condition I have ever seen in 29 years. There's junk, trash, and poor maintenance. I'm also going to tell you that I'm the past chairman of the board of the Beaver Creek Reserve Foundation. Last week, a donor came up to me who was an annual donor to that foundation and said, due to the poor maintenance, they were no longer going to donate anymore. I reminded him that I stopped my donations 2 years ago, and each time I made a donation and reduced it, I said to the foundation at Beaver Creek, please talk about cleaning this place up. And so I have to tell you that although they're doing some good things on infrastructure, I would invite anyone to take a walk around with their eyes open and see that Beaver Creek may not be representing what Eau Claire County would like to have it represent when you simply walk around and look around on the ground. And it is a nature reserve. Thank you.
Supervisor DeLuca.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know times are challenging for all places, and they're challenging for Beaver Creek as well. There is a long list. Like I said at the last meeting, I had a two-sided page report of items that were on the list for repair, and they had to be ranked by safety. They had to be ranked by security, and you know, they're working to do those things, but then you find that you've got old pipes that have too much copper in them, and the DNR then says you have 3 months to change that. So that's why we had to come so quickly with that last proposal. I think if you think that the Beaver Creek isn't doing enough, that's not the time to stop your donations. That's the time to make sure, if you think it's a good place for people to go and there's good things for children, that's when you should be making your donations. You can specifically donate to certain projects that they have on the list. I personally think they're doing a good job. I'm very happy to see that in the new capital repair for the next contract, that it's increasing to $100,000 for the last 4 years, because everything's costing more money. So we get donations, we put them where we can, we fix what we can as quickly as we can, but you know, you have to raise money, and now it's harder with donations because you can't write those off on your taxes anymore. So it's going to make things even more challenging in our aspect. So I think you need to realize, if you have an issue with something, you need to come out and volunteer, you need to donate some money. I think it offers great programming, and I see a lot of kids out there enjoying themselves. Thanks.
Anybody else wish to speak to the issue about the 10-year agreement with Beaver Creek Reserve? Supervisor Morditz for second time.
The things I'm complaining about are toilets laying on the ground, refrigerators laying around. I'm not talking about capital improvement. I'm not talking about safety of some type of project for things in the ground. I'm talking about general, simple, routine maintenance that needs to be better, and I'd appreciate it.
Point of order, just a minute.
Point of order. We're here to discuss the merits of a 10-year agreement with Beaver Creek. We're not here to talk about the administration and management
Point of
Beaver
order,
Creek.
I agree.
I'm sorry,
You're out of order. You need to talk.
Can I continue to my point of order? And that is, consequently, because of my complaints, I would feel more comfortable with a 5-year plan rather than a 10-year plan, because I believe a 10-year plan gives a impression that things are going great. Things are going well, but things are not going great. And maybe a review in 5 years is more appropriate. So I would feel more comfortable voting for this if there were a 5-year rather than a 10-year plan. The 5-year plan is served as well. And I apologize for not mentioning that earlier.
Okay. Supervisor Knight.
Can you hear me? Don't touch the button, don't touch that.
It's on.
Can you hear me now? Okay, I just want to put in my vote of support for Beaver Creek. I think a 10-year program would give them a good planning horizon. I volunteered out there. I think the staff is outstanding. I think the people, the families, the kids who go out there always learn something and have a good time. I think it's one thing that makes Eau Claire really a neat place. I mean, there's a lot going around in downtown Eau Claire with the Pablo Center. But as a balance too, Beaver Creek provides another asset for the county. You know, a great place to go and teach kids about nature along with the county forest. So I'm fully in support of this.
Supervisor Leary.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to speak a little bit about the length of the contract, that when it came before the Finance and Budget Committee. This is a change. In the past, we've had 5-year length of contracts. but it has been a planning issue. As has been noted, funding is a little more difficult to come by. And so they asked us to please consider a 10-year span so that it would help them better with planning, and so then they would know exactly what they could count on. So we supported that, and 10 years is a long time, but we're hoping that it will help them plan better so they can enhance their programming. I think some of what perhaps Supervisor Moritz was addressing might be something that I know in the past Supervisor Lavelle has mentioned. Dumping has been a big issue with other parks and forests concerns, so hopefully we can get those under control as well. Thank you.
Supervisor Beckfield?
It's definitely a huge asset for Eau Claire County, and it's a beautiful place to go. I've been out there many times, and what I will say is that when you're planning, even as a foundation or anything else, you want to know how long you're going to be there. And quite frankly, we're not planning on losing support at this level, I don't think, for a very, very, very long time. So a 10-year commitment to me does not affect my feeling, and I think everyone else should, because that sends a message to the people at Eau Claire County and the foundation and the people who work out there that we're committed to them.
I don't see anybody else wishing to speak to this issue. Oh, Supervisor Stellis?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to just support a few things that Supervisor Moritz pointed out. And I would also be comfortable with a shorter term. I was actually out there on Sunday. As I drove into the parking lot, there was junk sitting on the curb. This was not somebody that dumped. This was things that have been extracted from the reserve and left out on the curb for people to pick up free. And as I drove in toward the parking lot, there's now a pile of gravel and rock and whatever materials that are right along, they're spewing out, sloppily placed and right next to the parking lot as you go into the school.
Okay, and again, I'm going to have...
So I'm going to propose an amendment. So my overall concern is that I think that while we have done a great job with capital projects and some improvements, I think that we've done a rather inadequate job of maintaining what we already have. And so I'm concerned that our funding model is not, it's either not adequate, maybe we need more money for Beaver Creek because the model is not providing enough money to do that maintenance, or some other model may appear, but I'm not sure that the model under which we're operating today is actually getting the job done. And so I would be much more satisfied with a 5-year term, and I would move amendment to change the lease term to 5 years.
We have a motion amendment to change the lease terms to 5 years, wherever that's located in the contract. Do we have a second? We have a second by Supervisor Moritz. Discussion on the amendment changing the lease to a 5-year term. Seeing nobody, we'll be voting on the amendment changing the lease to a 5-year term. Supervisor Mortis, they still need yours. The motion fails, 3 yeses, 21 noes. We're back to the original motion of a 10-year agreement with Beaver Creek Reserve. Any discussion on that? Seeing none, it looks like you're ready to vote. You'll be voting on a 10-year agreement with Beaver Creek Reserve. Supervisor Knight? 23 yes, 1 no, 5 absent. The motion passes. We're on to amending or excuse me, we're on to 1819-48.
46.
Oh, excuse, you're correct, 1819-46.
Replace one FTE ADRC manager, grade R, with one FTE ADRC assistant director position, grade S. Add one FTE options counselor supervisor, grade P. Add 1.50 FTE van driver, grade A. Replace one FTE kitchen manager, grade I, with one FTE kitchen manager, grade K.
Can I have a motion? Supervisor Lavelle, seconded by Supervisor Coffey. Supervisor Beckfield, Chair of Human Resources, could you speak to that, please?
Absolutely. Hello. A few of the things that have happened is that the van driver is primarily used for the Meals on Wheels program, and now that we have our own cooks and our own supervisor, that whole organizational chart had to be shifted around. And the other good news is that there's grant funding and other monies to take care of the situation, so therefore there is no fiscal impact to the budget.
Supervisor Miller?
Yeah, and I would just like to expand a little bit on that. If you recall, even last month, I acknowledged that ADRC was now 10 years in existence, and in that time, the growth that department has experienced has been phenomenal. A large part due to the options counseling type of responsibilities. And in those 10 years, they've had the two supervisors, the director, which has been there for not the current director, but there has been a director position for all of 10 years, and then a manager was added within the last 5 or 6 years. And quite frankly, they're just bursting at the seams, and it's very difficult for them to be able to provide supervision and administrative and strategic planning and this and that and the next thing. So obviously, adding an options counselor supervisor who will also be a working options counselor makes a heck of a lot of sense given the quantity of individuals that they have been working with just in that information and counseling alone. The ADRC van driver, you may or may not know, but some time ago there was a van that was donated to the department for use in the rural parts of the county that did not necessarily need any type of paratransit transportation. And that has taken off tremendously. And that's the reason for asking for half-time, because it's been pretty much just voluntary up to this point. And the kitchen manager, as you know, when we first entered into the whole kitchen operation late last year, we really didn't know what to expect. And it was a great deal of, we go this route, we go that route kind of thing. And it has truly taken off as a program, nutrition program. It's doing very well. And by all rights, that kitchen manager being the full-time person and overseeing the whole operation really should be at a step up, be the supervisor, be the one responsible for the job performance reviews and so on, as opposed to the nutrition director or supervisor that's in place right now. So that's just a little bit broadening sort of the explanation of some of the positions that ADRC is asking, and to reinforce what Supervisor Beckfield said, these are all grant-related positions and doesn't fall on the levy. Thank you.
Supervisor DeLuca.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm very supportive of all the positions presented for this evening, and I'm glad that they're covered with the grant funding. I just wonder, will these grants be available year after year to continue the funding, or will it eventually come back to the county to fund these positions?
And Supervisor Pagonis, Chair of Budget and Finance.
We've been very fortunate with the Aging and Disability Resource Center. The vast majority of the funding, it's about a $2.5 million department. For 2018, there's only $100,000 on the levy. Since it began, the funding has been all state and federal. Then the Meals on Wheels is federal nutrition dollars, and then there's the Older Americans Act grant, both federal and state. So, and last year, I believe the state actually made a decision to fund the dementia specialists. So we've been very fortunate, and we've gotten all of the funding since its existence, the vast majority of the funding. We do have one match for transportation, but the vast majority of the funding is state and federal. So we don't anticipate that it will come back to us to fund these.
Any other comments? Seeing none, I think we're ready to vote on replacing two 1.0 full-time equivalent positions and adopting 0.5 and 1.0 full-time equivalent positions. That passes unanimously, 24-0, absent. Next is 1819-48.
Amending policy 5.19 of the Eau Claire County Human Resources Employee Policy Manual.
Can I have a motion? Supervisor Henning, second by Supervisor Dunning. Supervisor Beckfield, Chair of Human Resources, could you speak to that, please?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a pilot program that would actually be paying bonuses to employees. We do have Jamie Gower here, who could probably even better, if I could ask her for a little explanation of that.
If there's no objection, she can speak to it. Maybe you can take Gatlin's desk right there.
All right, thank you. Oh, sorry, loud. Yes, so this is a pilot program that was created, Catherine mentioned it a little bit at the start of the meeting today, based on feedback that the Human Resources team had received from employees and leaders across the organization in looking for alternative ways to recognize for pretty outstanding performance. The current process we have in place under this program administration allows for the same salary increase or the same compensation increase for every employee based on meeting their minimum expectations. And so there were a group of leaders who volunteered across the organization in many of the different departments that we have. And we came together, and for lack of a better word, through the kitchen sink at brainstorming and came up with a program that we believe will provide an opportunity for department heads to nominate employees within their teams for work above and beyond. And so this isn't work that is done simply as a kudos of, hey, I picked up a shift for someone, or I saw something really outstanding in customer service, but is really meant to be a program tied to moving our strategic initiatives forward, creating some innovative practices, and ultimately providing those folks who are really hitting it out of the ballpark another opportunity to receive some compensation. So programs or recipients can be nominated throughout the year, and there would be a committee that would come together at the end of the year to evaluate these nominations. The committee would be comprised of the county administrator, the chair of the Committee on Human Resources, the chair of the county board, the human resources director, and then our account manager from Real Living, who is our employee assistance program. And our hope is that we have a cross-section of individuals to review those nominations.
Thank you. Any questions of her? Supervisor Pagonis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm finding the timing of this to be odd. We are on the doorstep of working on our budget for the coming year. They're asking for $25,000, which sounds kind of like a lot to me right now, given some of the constraints I foresee. And it would seem to me that this is something that should be introduced as part of the budget session and not becoming kind of in the middle of the year as we think that we have this great program, let's start it up right now. So I'm opposed to this at this time and think it would be better done and better suited as part of the overall budget session.
Anybody else wishing to speak? Supervisor Stelzis.
Yeah, well, just a question. Implementation would not be immediate, I thought. I thought it would begin in 2019, which would mean it would have to be part of the 2019 budget. Is that accurate?
I'm getting a nod of the head over there.
Yeah.
Supervisor Pagonis.
Right, but if we voted in as a resolution, then there's an expectation that we're going to implement it. So it's not as though we could, oh, oops, let's change our mind in 2 months. I mean, we're voting it in as a resolution. So it's making a commitment, it's making a dollar commitment regardless of when it starts. So this dollar commitment needs to be made during the budget process. It goes back to all those budget priorities we kept talking about. You know, I understand that we need to take care of our employees, but we have lots of things that we need to take care of, and we have an 11% increase, as Madam Michelle said, an 11% increase in health insurance. So I just think the timing of this is very, very odd.
Supervisor Miller.
Well, I think Supervisor Pagonis does raise a good point. One of the dilemmas is this body had decided years ago that any change in the employee policy manual that had a fiscal impact had to come forth to this board. So the thought is that, I mean, you of course have the right or option to refer it back to HR or to take it to budget and finance if you wish, or to delay it, table it until the full budget process, because it will be included, or at least it was in the proposed HR budget for 2019. So I think I'm going to pass the ball back to you, Supervisor Pagonis, and you can take it from there.
All right, then I will make a...
Supervisor Beckfield.
My thought on this is it's actually asking to amend the policy, and then we could fund it during the amount could be amended at the budget session. It would be my theory, but this way we'd get it into the policy manual, allowing the pilot program to take off. If you don't fund it, then you really don't have it. I'm just throwing that idea out there.
Supervisor Leary.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This reminds me a little bit of, remember a few months ago or about a year ago, we voted to spend $20,000 for the Farm Technology Days, and that was great, and it passed overwhelmingly, and we were grateful. But then when it came to budget time, we forgot to include it, and I'm afraid something like this is going to happen. I think it's a worthwhile project, but I agree with Supervisor Pagonis, it needs to be part of the budget. So I think we need not, I don't want to discourage support for this, but I think we need to balance it out with all of our other planning for the budget. I think it's appropriate for Human Resources to put it forth as part of their budget and bring it before the Finance Committee as part of that process. So I think we should delay that, and I'll make that motion that we delay this so that it can come through the budget process.
Is your motion to table it until the budget process?
Yes.
Okay, we have a motion to table it until our budget process. Do we have a second? I don't see a second.
Postpone.
Postpone? Postpone until our budget process.
Then we'll take.
Do we have a second on that? Supervisor Chilson seconds it. We're now debating the postponement of this resolution until the budget process. Speaking to that issue. Supervisor Maury?
I wasn't speaking to the amendment, I was
Okay.
speaking to the motion. Just had a
How about
question.
Supervisor Dunning? Are you
Yes.
speaking to the amendment?
Yes.
Okay.
I think that's a bad idea. We're looking at the resolution to put it into place, not to pay it. It has to be part of that before they can even put it in the budget. And if we wait till the budget's process, that won't be, if that resolution isn't part of the budget process, it still wouldn't be approved. So I think we need to approve the resolution with, if we're going to make any kind of a change, we should make it that this is a 2019 project, but it's in the resolution now, that the resolution's approved now with funding not for 2018. I don't think it was, doesn't sound like it was intended for 2018. It sounded like it was intended for 2019, in which there still is an opportunity to put it in the budget. But it can't be put in the budget till the resolution's passed.
Supervisor Mort is speaking to the postponing it to the budget.
Yes, I need just a little bit of education on why we would postpone it. Not to let, I'm not going to let a sleeping dog lie. I'm just going to use as an example. We're committing $2,725,000 over 10 years to Beaver Creek Reserve. I guess I don't really understand how that's, if we're committing that before all those budgets are done, why is this wrong to commit this before the budget is done? And so I don't think we should delay it. Maybe I totally misunderstand the finances here. Thank you.
Supervisor Buchanan.
Yeah, my question has to go back to what Supervisor Dunning was speaking to. If we put this in postponement, where the body will not be taking this up until after the budget, does that mean that this item would not be in order if it were put into the budget because it was already on the table? So it's not really a debate argument I'm making, I just have that point of clarification.
My understanding, Corp Counsel may want to speak to this, is that we're not approving the money, we're approving putting this in the policy manual. The approving of the money would happen at the budget time. Is that correct?
That's correct. So if the board is not funded at the budget, you have the policy in place, but there's no money to implement it.
Right, but I guess my question is more so the other way around. So if we do put this in postponement, then is it in order to have something in the budget for 2019 when this has not been voted on as a policy in place? So we're putting money into something without a policy. So I guess that's my question is.
I'm not sure.
I think, if I can jump in here, I think you could do that, and basically what you'd be doing is you'd be postponing this. Money could be placed in the budget, and obviously that would be contingent on being included in the final budget document. And then if the money is allocated in the budget that you approve, then this resolution would come back and be adopted by the board. So you could go at it that way also.
Can't go wrong. The bottom line is you're going to have to approve the money at some point if it's going to move forward. So, but we're currently on the motion to postpone. Speaking to that motion, Supervisor Pagonis.
Thank you. I do believe this needs to be postponed for several reasons. And it doesn't have to be after the budget process. It can be coincident with the budget. However, it has a significant fiscal impact. And I believe that the policy of this board is that anytime something has a fiscal impact, it goes to finance and budget for discussion and evaluation. That's typically how things happen. So to Supervisor Moritz, the contract for Beaver Creek, it started in administration, it came to finance and budget. When things have a significant fiscal impact, we get to see it. So it does need to be postponed because finance and budget hasn't seen it, and it should be referred.
Supervisor Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm more torn on this than ever. I sit on the committee, but unfortunately was absent at this very meeting where this discussion took place. I guess I can appreciate Supervisor Pagonis wanting this to perhaps come to budget and finance as the traditional or usual. On the other hand, a vote tonight, not to postpone, but rather a vote in favor of it, in general, would be sending a positive message to all the employees. And that's where my conflict arises here. I can appreciate the desire to postpone it until the budget process and what have you, but no, I'm not sure. Sorry.
Supervisor DeLuca.
Thank you. So if this resolution didn't state the 25,000, like if we decided not to postpone it, we go back to the resolution, we amend it and take the 25,000 out, but just put the policy in place, is that something we could do?
Yeah, it is something we could do.
All right, thank you.
Supervisor Leary.
I'd like to withdraw my motion to postpone my amendment.
I would need the second to also withdraw it. Who seconded that? Chilson, do you withdraw it?
Sure.
Okay, it's withdrawn. We're back to the main motion amending policy 519 of the Eau Claire County Human Resources Employee Policy Manual. Speaking to that, Supervisor Pagonis.
Then I would move to refer this to finance and budget and have it come back sometime in the near future, in the next, when we can get it on the agenda.
Well, we have a motion to refer. Do we have a second? We have a second by Supervisor Henning. This would be referred to Budget and Finance to, as I understand, it has to be back in 60 days max. So we are now on the motion to refer to Budget and Finance. People wishing to speak to that. Supervisor Buchanan.
Is it debatable?
I didn't think referral was debatable.
Pardon?
I didn't think referral was debatable.
I'm not
Referral was debatable.
We're currently on the motion to refer to Budget and Finance.
But I didn't think that's the debate. I think you just vote.
Pardon?
Does the commit or refer, yes.
Yes, you can debate that.
All right.
In that case, since we can debate it, I would like to speak in favor of the motion to refer. I'm in the same position that Supervisor Miller was in. I've long been a strong supporter of our labor and making sure that we honor our frontline workers. And so I wanted to not send a negative signal and vote it today, but I also believe process matters. And so I was really torn on the motion to postpone, but I think this is a really easy, for lack of a better phrase, or no, it's a good thing. Compromise is a good thing in our community. This allows Budget and Finance the opportunity to take this look at it, but we're still getting an opportunity after Budget and Finance looks to vote yes in favor of our frontline workers. So I'll be supporting the motion to refer to committee.
Supervisor Morditz on the motion to refer to Budget and Finance.
Supervisor Buchanan answered my question. Thank you.
Supervisor Maury.
I just had a question. The fact sheet mentioned that there was a PowerPoint presentation outlining the program and program materials, and that wasn't part of my packet. So I don't know, you know, does the one-time incentive go to 10 employees, 1 employee, 5? What, you know, the criteria aren't there for me to evaluate. So I'd like clarification on that when it comes back.
Yeah, we're on the motion to refer. So.
Well, I guess I'm asking for further clarification when it comes back.
Can we have staff speak to that, if there's no objection?
Point of order, we're on the motion to refer. I think we need to resolve
Point of order is well taken. Anybody left to speak to the motion to refer? Supervisor Niemann.
I just had a question. If it's referred to Budget and Finance, is it possible that this would never come back to this body?
That's not possible. It's required to come back within 60 days with their recommendation. If it doesn't come back, it will automatically be put on the agenda.
Thank you.
I don't see anybody else wishing to speak to referral. Please vote on referral of the policy 519. The motion passes 21 yes, 3 no. It's been referred. We're on to 1819-58.
Amending the Eau Claire County Human Resources Employee Policy Manual.
Can I have a motion? Motion by Supervisor Leary, second by Supervisor Borboom. Supervisor Beckfield, Chair of Human Resources, could you speak to this, please?
Thank you.
As soon as I get you on there, there you go.
One of the things that we have been looking very closely at on human resources is trying to stay competitive to get the proper people in all our places. And one of the challenges we're running into is some of our benefits are becoming less attractive to some employees. For example, the one in front of you is the number of holiday pay issues. There are people that number of days off for holiday. And one of the things we're finding ourselves doing is we're dropping behind on that. And one of the, even though you lose in services, you have a lower cost of to the budget. There is some, I can't remember exactly how much the fiscal input impact was on there. But the idea would be, for example, I think Chippewa County is a day or two more than we do. Dunn County is at least a day more than we do. And if you read the information that's there, the fiscal impact would, according to the information we have, would be about $33,000 a year if we made that benefit change to the system.
Thank you. Others that wish to speak to this? I'm seeing none. I think you're ready to vote.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, can I ask a question, please? I have a question.
Yes, Supervisor Pugonis.
So the fiscal impact is 33,000, but for what? Is that the cost of having the courthouse closed?
Supervisor Beckfield, can you answer?
I'm going to refer that to Jamie if you don't mind. Are you back there?
Jamie, could you speak to that? Could you repeat your question, Supervisor Pugonis, for Jamie?
Well, yes, as I understood the resolution, it's to add 2 holidays, but then it ends with a fiscal impact of 33,000, and I want to know what that 33,000 is being used for. What is that about? It doesn't give us any explanation.
Okay. You should be on. Oh, she might have pushed her button. Are you on now?
the $33,000 is an approximation for those operations that are 24/7. So for example, in the jail, they'll continue to need to provide staff even on a closed holiday. So members of the Human Resources team worked with finance to evaluate holiday pay for those times, and this would be an approximation of those same number of individuals working, including folks in the highway.
Does that answer your question, Supervisor Pagonis?
Well, it does, and maybe I need to ask Corporation Counsel about what I thought was when there's a significant fiscal impact in a resolution, that it goes to finance and budget for some type of an assessment, but I don't recall other times when there were fiscal impacts that budget didn't find. And I kind of agree with the holidays, but when there's a fiscal impact involved, I'm just questioning whether finance is expected to be evaluating that.
I don't, correct me if I'm wrong, Corp Counsel, but I don't think the code requires that, even though historically it tends to be done.
No, it's not required by the code. Otherwise, every time there was any fiscal impact at all, it would have to go to Finance and Budget Committee. That's not been the practice. Whether something gets referred to Finance and Budget or another committee is a decision for the board to make.
Okay. Others wishing to speak to this? I'm seeing nobody. It seems you're ready to vote. You're voting on amending the Elkhart County Human Resources Employee Policy Manual on holidays. It passes unanimously, 24 yeses, 0 noes, 5 absents. We're moving on to an item brought to us by Committee on Planning Development, 1819-12.
To amend section 20.02.008C of the Code, General Shoreline Standards, to amend section 20.07.002C of the Code, Activities Allowed Within a Vegetative Buffer Zone, to amend section 20.15, Appendix A of the Code, Mitigation Schedule, to amend section 20.15, Appendix A of the Code, Detailed Explanations of Mitigation Items.
Can I have a motion? Motion by Supervisor Dunning, seconded by Nancy Coffey. Vice Chair for P&D, Robin Leary, could you speak to this, please?
Certainly. The Committee of Planning and Development heard this at the July 10th meeting, and we need to make this change in response to the fact that we're not able to have more harsher rules and regulations than is allowed by the state. And in this instance, Act 55 allows that we cannot be more restrictive with our setback and viewing corridor. So the first two changes that are outlined in the fact sheet are referring to language that will bring us into compliance with state regulations. The third change is regarding mitigation schedule type A, which is regarding points that are awarded when they're doing an evaluation. And this would then address failing systems rather than awarding compliance systems. So it's an evaluation technique. There's no fiscal impact to these changes, and it will bring us into compliance, and the committee voted 5-0 in support, and I would urge your support.
Others wishing to speak to this item? I'm seeing none. It appears you're ready to vote on amending the section 20.02.008C of the Code, General Shoreland Standards. Motion passes 24 yes, 0 no, 5 absent. We're on to an item brought to us by the Highway Committee, 1819-53.
Urging the Governor and Wisconsin Legislature to find a sustainable solution to fund Wisconsin's transportation system.
Can I have a motion? Motion by Supervisor Lavelle, seconded by Supervisor Beckford. Could the chair of the Highway, Supervisor Henny, please speak to this?
Yes, the Highway Committee voted for 4-0 in support of this to urge Madison to do something with their infrastructure and get us some money.
Anybody, Supervisor Anderson?
I was absent for that vote, but if I were there, it would have been 5-0.
Anybody else wishing to speak to it? If not, it looks like you're ready to vote on urging the Governor of Wisconsin Legislature to find a sustainable solution to fund Wisconsin's transportation system. Please take your keypads and vote. That passes unanimously, 24 yes, 0 no, 5 absent. We're on to an item brought to us by Committee on Finance and Budget, 1819-54.
Authorizing payment of vouchers over $10,000 issued during the month of July 2018.
Can I have a motion? Motion by Supervisor Beckfield, seconded by Supervisor Niemann. Any questions on that? I'm seeing none. You can take your keypad and vote for authorizing payment of vouchers over $10,000 issued during the month of July. Russell and Moritz. Supervisor Russell, yours isn't registered. Thank you. Motion passes 23 yes, 1 no, 5 absent. Reports of standing committees, commissions, and boards. We have from the Chippewa Valley Airport Commission, 1819-37.
This ordinance makes changes to the Eau Claire County Code Title 12, Transportation and Public Works.
Can I have a motion? Supervisor Chilson, seconded by Supervisor Mortivitz. Supervisor Mortivitz, as a rep of Eau Claire County, can you speak to this?
Yes, this was.
Just,
This was reviewed, I think, by the airport administration and our corporate counsel. And this just puts us in a better position to seek more business and update some language to the best of my knowledge. And I believe there is no fiscal impact. And I strongly recommend we do this. We're looking to see if we can bring more business to the airport, and that's to the county's benefit, of course.
any questions, comments? Hearing none, it appears you're ready to vote on amending section 12 of the code. Supervisor Knight? Thank you. Motion passes unanimously, 24 yes, 0 no's, 5 absent. Having no other business before the board, we stand adjourned.
This program was brought to you by a cooperation between Newsworks and Eau Claire County. Newsworks is made possible by continuing community support. If you would like to volunteer or make a donation, please contact us via phone at 715-839-5067 or online at valleymediaworks.org.